Welcome to Rewrite the Rules, a podcast where we share stories of powerful women across the region who are rewriting the rules of life, career, and relationships. Today's episode, we have a very interesting guest, Sonia Gupta. Sonia Gupta is Managing Director, Growth and Innovation at Accenture, based in Singapore. In her role, Sonia works closely with C-suite and board of companies to frame, design, and deliver growth transformation. Can you tell us, Sonia, a little bit about how you got here?
Thank you, Ritu. I love the title, Rewrite the Rules, and I'm delighted to be here this morning. Okay, how I got here. Wow. Simple enough question, a much longer answer.
Go for it.
So I think, if I had to just call out the general chronological journey, I grew up in a wonderful sort of government services home, 3 sisters, a very fun and fulfilling magical world, Hogwarts-like, with all the good stuff. My first job then took me into the Coca-Cola company, where I was in brand marketing and did a couple of different stints. It brought me here to Singapore as well, and I worked with both the company and the bottler. And I moved to consulting at that time. It was a heady rush, and the joy of actually working with multiple industries, and it was a great time for learning. And, of course, the dot-com boom was not what we imagined it to be. But, it's what got me from industry into consulting. And then I didn't look back. I've done a few different roles in professional services across a few organizations, from PricewaterhouseCoopers. It was called PricewaterhouseCoopers back then, PwC, IBM, and then Accenture.
Oh, wow. So. That's quite a journey. And also, I know when you said about the dot-com thing, it's how now people are talking about AI and things. As you look back, were there any pivotal moments, pivotal turns, twists in your life or career, which kind of changed the trajectory for you, which made you rethink or rewrite certain things?
I always find moments a bit, a lot of people have these life-altering moments. I think sometimes when I look back, I often think about the phases of life I've been in. And I don't think we fully appreciate, Ritu, just how foundational and informative your early years are.
That's right.
So,
okay.
That phase of my life, I think the best way to describe it is just clueless and confident.
Okay.
I had no...
I like that. Clueless and confident.
I just had no reason to have the confidence I did, but it was just such a wonderfully life-affirming phase of my life. I just remember that as being a very fun time.
Okay.
And I just showed up for all kinds of things, music, dance, public speaking, and, just like, which is why I say clueless and confident. So I would say that first part of my life was really that, self-affirming, clueless and confident in the most wonderful way. I think the second phase of my life was really just learning craft, right? So I fell into business school. It was a little less the safe bubble. It's a little more of the real world. You don't quite appreciate what that does for you. So you fall into your first job, you learn commercial acumen. And I remember that phase as just being, I said yes a lot and didn't question much, Ritu. And then, I think that second phase, like I said, was a lot about craft, right? Learning functional understanding of how great brands are built, all of that. I think the third phase of my life was actually that whole, you're then really getting into serious family progression, you're kind of managing home. But it was also, if I had to look at it professionally for a minute, that third phase of my life was really about learning leadership. And it was less about how great you were and your skills. It was really about learning to manage through people. And actually, it's a far bigger leap than people tell you it is.
Yeah.
So I think the third phase was really about learning about good leadership and bad, to be honest, because you're also going through a phase in your life and you're building. And then I would say the phase that I'm in now is... you've done the leap of becoming a parent. You've looked after loved ones. So I think that fourth phase, the reason I didn't call out a pivotal moment, and I will in a minute, is I think it really teaches you so little matters.
Yeah.
And I think while there were pivotal moments in each, and we'll share stories in a bit, but I would say this phase is about reflecting, what you've learned, who you want to be, being very choiceful.
Great. I think, you've articulated all the phases so well. I want to pick one or two things from there. The second piece about learning craft, and the reason, and I will come to the third phase also. Listeners of Rewrite the Rules are, all women leaders, but typically aspiring women leaders who are, who are 5 years in their career or maybe starting out their career. And there is always a thing of, oh, how do I grow quickly, or what's next thing, right? And you just talked about, honing your craft, or really kind of going deep and, working on your craft. Tell us a little bit more about what that meant and why is that important?
Yeah. Ritu, I love that you picked up on this, because often sometimes the advice you get is very unhelpful. I'm going to break down what I think, maybe worked for me or didn't, or, So I think the first thing is saying yes a lot. Yeah. I think in the early stage of your career, honestly, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And there are many aspects to yourself where you'll only figure out if you say yes a lot.
Yeah.
And, it could be functional, it could be a business, it could be anything. So I think the first thing is you just have to say yes a lot before you figure out and decode what makes you you, what can you do better than anybody else. If you say something didn't work for you, actually appreciating why it didn't. So are you an individual contributor? Are you a team player? Do you thrive in large social environments? Do you like structured? Do you like unstructured? And these are just, it's not set in stone, Ritu. But it's having the commitment and reflection to actually decode this. And don't then say, oh, then I won't do. It's more about knowing.
Yes.
I think the second thing, and honestly, I wish I could tell you it was by design. It was completely by accident. But it's really building commercial acumen. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. No matter what you do for a living, it doesn't matter if you're on the HR function, whether you're doing data and AI, whether you're doing marketing, whether you're running. I think most people don't appreciate how important it is to understand how a company makes money. And the reason that's important is not just for you to understand the why, it's also to be able to understand how you contribute. And it doesn't just give you meaning, it's also the second part of what you said. Often you want to build craft that's right and will allow you to grow. And the way you do that is when you connect the two. I have a few others, but I would say those two. And you have to commit to wanting to be good at something.
Correct. I love the fact, of course, about saying yes, but also building commercial acumen. Just yesterday, in fact, last night, I was having dinner with this really senior leader at this company, and we were talking about, and she was mentioning about building more women diversity in the organization. And she said her company was doing fairly okay, but that okay percentage came, it was like about 22 or 23%. But when we dug deeper into the data, it's actually a bulk of those women leaders were in functions like HR, admin, finance. And her view was that we need to build women in the commercial side of it, right? And I think you make such a good point about commercial acumen. In my own work, running women leadership program, I see that that's a missing piece. You were doing well and all of that. You can do, and now suddenly you have to lead. Right? What are one or two things that worked for you when you started to lead? Worked for you or didn't work for you? Because we learned from both, right? So, what would you say there?
I actually think what doesn't work is very, very instructive. Because, and honestly, if you, one of my big tenets has always been when you know better, do better. So what works when you step in, moving away from just being an individual contributor to actually leading a team is figuring out, and over time I've done this, right? But really your philosophy of leadership, Ritu. And I think the simplest way to do it very early in your career is to just observe. I mean, this is my biggest thing about hybrid work cultures, that we do not fully appreciate how much of your leadership and your craft actually comes from observation.
Yes.
Some of these things are not taught or decoded, right? You need to observe, you need to reflect, you need to figure out how you then want to do something and then apply it, right? That full cycle needs to happen. But it actually comes from observing. Right? And so I think the first thing, the easiest is actually to just observe, reflect on when you look at good leaders and you see what they do, what works. I think the second thing is clarity. When I moved from industry to consulting, I had not appreciated how much clarity and structure of thought is actually such a valuable skill. And getting better and better at being able to distill and clarify the why we're doing something, what we're doing before you get to the how is just a good practice. And particularly as a leader, being able to provide the outline of this. Right. But how do you have enough clarity to structure an outline that then allows people to weigh and build, make even better than you could probably come up with something.
Correct.
And I think the third thing, honestly, is there is all the brilliance in the world will get you nowhere without the human. And now when I look back, I think the instances where I have been remarkably successful or not has been the appreciation for the people you're with and what makes them tick, Ritu.
Yeah.
There is no formula.
Right. And this is so interesting because, there's so many things you said and we could go on. But I do want to go back to the story. Tell us a little bit about some stories, some anecdotes that had a big impact on you.
So the first one I tell you is completely flippant. Judge me if you want.
That.
So maybe two. These are more the personal ones before I lean into the professional ones. So I came home one day and I was telling my mom that someone was telling me I'm not very feminine when I laugh. Like I laugh very inelegantly. And my mother said the most amazing thing in pure Tamil, which, some words just can't translate into English.
Okay.
They just don't carry the same heft. But basically she said, you really, she's basically short of saying, I feel sorry for the person. She said, you shouldn't worry about someone who actually has something to say about how you laugh.
Yeah.
Right? So choose wisely. There's the silliest thing on the planet. And it's a bit like saying, don't take criticism from someone you won't take advice on. Really,
Correct.
your laugh, they're not worth worrying about, right? But I would say in there lies a big tenet or coaching point from my mum was always know yourself. And she used to say something in Tamil which loosely translates to, you can choose what you do, but you can't choose what you like to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your question was more about pivotal moments. But these things, actually, it's being true to yourself. And I told you about the algorithm. I wish I could tell you I had done it by design. But I think over time, I just figured some things work, some things don't. But Ritu, the thing with that is, if I think about pivotal moments, a lot of my life has been a series of experiments. Like I will make no claim to it all having been part of a grand plan.
Sure.
But I think what helped was this thing of knowing yourself. So I think pivotal moment in that knowing yourself allows you to put yourself in environments where you will thrive.
Yeah.
And frankly, even as a leader, you become a lot more thoughtful about creating environments in which other people thrive depending on what they're great at.
That's right.
I think the second one I was going to tell you was I was on a very important project for a client. And I was, we were in the final stages of actually this study. The engagement partner, unfortunately, could not be there for the meeting. And I was in a room with a client, with two very senior people from the client in my own office. That particular client was intimidating, was personally attacking, and it wasn't really about the report, right? So everything had been done collaboratively. It was all data driven. There was not a bunch of opinions. It had come out of consumer work and all of that. But here was a very large man, like a 6'2", barrel, literally hands on the desk, shouting at me. I've over time learned, having lived and worked in many different cultures, to listen to what someone is saying, not how they're saying it. In that moment, I was listening to him and trying really hard to be professional. And he was like shouting and being very personally attacking. Like I said, it was almost physically intimidating, like a tiny table like this, leaning over. And I was using all of my professionalism and all of my will to resolve to be, thoughtful and kind of respond point by point. Yeah. But I was shaking. I just got to a point where I had to pause and I had to say, I need to excuse myself. And I went to the restroom and I just broke down. It was just a physical body response to feeling unsafe and to feeling threatened and attacked.
Yeah.
Right?
Attacked, yeah.
Anyway, I walked back into the room and I said, this conversation isn't headed in the right direction. We need to reconvene and we'll find another time. Anyway, long story. I walk into the house and my little son, he was really little then. I still remember this. He was like maybe 3 in Hong Kong. And I walk in through the door and he comes to me and he hugs me and he says, what happened, Mama? Were there bullies in the office?
Oh my God.
And, mic drop. I was like, oh my God, my son has articulated what I couldn't. I was having all of these feelings and I didn't know what had happened. I was really upset. And I basically called my manager and I said, I'm resigning. But moment of bad leadership and good leadership. This manager of mine, he was my mentor and coach. He was on a plane the next day. He said, Sonia, that must have been awful. He said, come and see me. I'll see you tomorrow at so-and-so time. After having had this was clearly one of the low points in my entire career. And he just sat across from me and just looked me in the eye, heard me out, never questioned, never, just let me speak.
Yeah.
Then he went on to basically say that was unacceptable. He said, we are an organization that has our set of values. No one should have to put up with this kind of client toxicity. But then he went on to, of his own volition, say the client will apologize. We will write to them and formally get an apology. And he said, the decision is yours, whether you want to continue to see through the project, if you have other things. He said, most importantly, know that you are valued above any project, right? The things come and go. This was really an unfortunate thing and I wish it hadn't happened. It was an empowering conversation. So from how it was incredible. They say, right, it's how people make you feel.
Wow. That's so good. That's so good. I'm still, it's a great story. I do a lot of work with women leaders in the region. Every single one of them, and actually even men, would have gone through some element of this bullying somewhere, right? But it's how a leader addresses it. It really shapes the way you move forward with it. I want to move a little bit to, because all this has been reflective. Tell me about this phase, the fourth phase. What's happening here?
It's great.
Yes.
I think the highs are higher, the lows are not so low.
Yeah.
I think, and I tell you, the things you learn. My father was a lion of a man. I think my parents were incredible people, really. You can't pick your parents, but it's incredible how instructive, and of course my siblings. And I remember going on a walk with my father. He was the sharpest brain, very, very fast on his feet. But, a disease that had limited him, right? So he would move in a very slow shuffle. And I was on an evening walk with him and I asked him, how are you doing? We were talking about life and whatever. So I said, do you have any regrets? He said, I have no regrets. I have given life my best. And Ritu, I must say that when I look at this phase in my life, every day, every moment being choiceful, I wish people would tell you this. The only currency that matters is time.
Yeah.
It's not money. And it's very hard to see it. And of course, you have to be great at your craft and you have to create financial well-being and all of that. But the one thing you can't get more of, even if you want to, is time. And I think this phase is about really the highs being higher, far bolder. Again, you navigate all kinds of roles and people and environments, but there's so much goodness. You see so much goodness. And I think that's it.
Nice. Very nice. Sonia, if I were to ask you any advice you would give your younger self, what would that be?
There is a plan.
That's the advice. That's good. There is a plan.
Most of the time, I tell you, my life was a series of experiments. Some of them, panned out great. Some were failures. But because it was an experiment, it didn't matter. And I think the reason I tell you that I said there is a plan is more, I think when you're younger, you don't know why, life is testing you or something comes your way or why are things like this. But just have faith that there is a plan. I think the second, and we spoke about this earlier, is look for goal models, not role models. Because I think whatever your chosen field, sometimes you won't often see a leader that reflects all of the personal choices you want to make for yourself.
Yes.
Whatever your choices may be. There's something to learn from everyone. So advice is, there is a plan. The other thing I'll say is look for goal models, not role models. I think the third thing I will say is lift those around you. And it has nothing to do with the age, stage, level you are, And this thing, my number one tenet, which is you can't choose what you do. You can choose what you do, but you don't choose what you like to do.
Yeah.
And that, I think, just being guided by that is quite helpful.
That's good. Sonia, I'm going to ask you something which I've been asking a lot of people and I hear mixed views, but I'm really interested. Because under Rewrite the Rules, we also run Women Leadership Program. And there's always very interesting conversation about should organizations have women leadership programs as part of building diversity, gender diversity in the organization. What's your view?
So it's amazing how my answer has changed at different points in time.
And tell us about that too.
Yes.
That's interesting.
I think early in my career, like most people, I think the ferocity with which the notion that you are a woman and hence a leader and hence you need to be coached differently is downright offensive. And, I'm as good as anyone else in the room.
Yeah.
There's no need to call out the label of me being a woman. Over time, though, what I have observed is, while it's hard to just say, yes, do a women's leadership program, I think there are some principles of what I have seen are helpful when you shape something like this and some things that are unhelpful.
Right.
What I think is critical is the language you use around it and how you shape it. And you can only do that when people appreciate that equality is not the dilution of quality. Yeah. And the second is that you're actually being very thoughtful in the design. So in the design, one of the mistakes I often see organizations make is you create an echo chamber.
Yeah.
When you are a 90-10, trying to solve the 10% within the 10% with all the trappings of the 10% is the worst thing you can do. You need to have the 90% be a part of this journey because there's a reason why the environment looks the way it does. And actually having a very helpful, safe conversation that actually allows men to participate fully in the intent of actually shaping the next set of leaders in the organization, all of whom need to thrive together.
Absolutely. And I think some really good insights. As I'm trying to wrap up our conversation, because this is great. What would your advice, if I could use that word advice, because you're a consultant, would be for organizations trying to work up their gender diversity? Like, what are different ways that an organization can look at that?
The first is at the individual level, the second is at the team level, and the third is at the leadership.
Yeah.
And then separately, if you think about the 3 or 4 opportunities, I think there's something at a policy level, there's something at an initiatives level, and there's something at a community level. And if I could just elaborate on the 3 rather than the former model, I think there's certainly things around policy.
Yeah.
Right? So it's, the leadership DNA, there's a lot about trust and culture, respect for the individual. And some of these things seem basic. I mean, is it really a woman thing or a man thing? And look, societal models are going to look very different tomorrow. What are the policy shifts you need to be thinking about to allow women to thrive in whatever that new societal model is? I think you need to think about where society is evolving to, and your policies need to be reflective of it. It's also about transition times. And my observation is often when women, for whatever stage, have a demanding personal situation, they often ask to be removed from a P&L role, a more demanding. And with all good intention, they're often rainmakers, they're high performers. The system kind of steps in to help you to take a step away and go into a role that's less demanding, less frontline, less commercial. What happens though is you then become part of the forgotten few. So it's very important at that transition time that all of these high profile, high potential women are proactively given a buddy coach who's actually responsible to get them to transition back. You need it for 6 months, fine. You need it for 12 months, fine. But there's a regular check-in. You're kept commercially relevant. When you come back, you're never going to be the one that's going to put up your hand. And there's a lot more on initiatives that I can talk about. But I just want to talk about community. I think we do need the equivalent of connected circle conversations, man, woman. I mean, these are human conversations.
Yeah.
And I think often the lack of understanding leads to certain behaviors. So this thing of community and getting people to just appreciate context, because real change will start with that.
Yeah, got it. So on that note, Sonia, thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. We really enjoyed, at least I enjoyed our conversation so much, and I'm sure our listeners are going to get a lot of good nuggets from you. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you for having me.